The castle of Thornvale had not seen sunlight in 43 years. It rose from the northern cliffs like a rotted tooth, black stone twisted with centuries of suffering, its towers clawing at clouds that never moved. The villagers below spoke of it only in whispers, and even then, only when drunk enough to forget the consequences. Children were taught not to look at its silhouette against the moon. Mothers sang lullabies about staying indoors after dark. Fathers sharpened stakes they prayed they'd never use, because Thornvale was hers. The Vampire Queen, Seraphine the Pale, the Blood Countess. She had worn many names across the decades, but they all meant the same thing: death. No one who entered her castle ever returned. Until tonight. The boy's name was Elias, and he was 13 years old. His boots made soft echoes against the cobblestone path leading to the massive iron gates, each step deliberate, measured, as if he were walking toward a school exam rather than certain doom. His clothes were simple: a worn brown tunic, patched trousers, a cloak that had belonged to his father. In his hands he carried nothing, no weapon, no cross, no garlic or holy water, or any of the desperate talismans the villagers clutched when darkness fell. Just his hands, and his memory. The gates opened before he could knock. They groaned inward with the sound of 1,000 rusted screams, revealing a courtyard choked with dead vines and skeletal trees. Torches flickered with unnatural blue flames along the walls, casting shadows that moved independently of their sources. The air tasted of copper and rot. Elias stepped inside. Close the gates. A voice whispered from nowhere and everywhere at once. The iron gates slammed shut behind him with a finality that would have broken most men. Elias didn't flinch. He had expected this. He had prepared for this. For 3 years, he had prepared. The courtyard led to a grand entrance, double doors carved with scenes of ancient battles, angels falling, humans kneeling. They opened without touch, inviting him into a hall that stretched impossibly far, lined with pillars of black marble veined with something that looked disturbingly like frozen blood. Candelabers hung from chains so long their tops vanished into shadow, their flames dancing to music no one played. And at the far end of that hall, perhaps 100 meters away, sat a throne, and on that throne sat her, Seraphine. Even from this distance, Elias could feel her presence like a physical weight against his chest. She was beautiful in the way a blade is beautiful, perfect, deadly, designed to cut. Her skin was alabaster, so pale it seemed to glow faintly in the darkness. Her hair fell in midnight waves over bare shoulders, framing a face that could have been carved by a sculptor obsessed with symmetry and cruelty. Her eyes were the color of old blood, and they fixed on him with the intensity of a predator analyzing prey. She wore a gown of deep crimson that moved like liquid, and around her throat hung a necklace of what appeared to be black diamonds, though Elias knew better. They were solidified tears, the tears of her victims, hardened by dark magic into gemstones. His mother's tear was among them. A child, Seraphine said, her voice echoing through the hall with supernatural clarity. It was beautiful, that voice, musical. The kind of voice that could convince you to walk off a cliff while smiling. How unexpected. Elias began walking toward her. His footsteps were the only sound in the vast hall. With each step, he felt eyes upon him. Dozens, hundreds of eyes watching from the shadows, from behind pillars, from the darkness above. Her court, her servants, vampires all, ancient and hungry, amused by the suicidal child marching toward his death. "Do you know who I am?" Seraphine asked, leaning forward slightly, her lips curving into a smile that revealed the tips of fangs. "Yes," Elias said. His voice was steady. "You're Seraphine, the Vampire Queen. You've ruled this region for over 4 decades. You've killed hundreds, maybe thousands. You drained them slowly, making their deaths last for days, feeding on their fear as much as their blood." Her smile widened. "And yet you walk through my gates. Are you brave, little one, or simply stupid?" "Neither," Elias replied, still walking, 50 meters away now. "I'm here because I have something to say to you." Laughter rippled through the hall, cold, mocking laughter from the vampires hidden in shadow. Seraphine raised one pale hand, and the laughter stopped instantly, as if cut with a knife. "Speak, then," she said, her amusement evident. Entertain me before you die. Elias stopped walking. He stood now perhaps 20 meters from the throne, close enough to see the intricate embroidery on her gown, close enough to see the way her fingernails tapered into subtle claws, close enough to see the absolute confidence in her eyes. She had no fear of him. Why would she? He was a child, unarmed, alone. 3 years ago, Elias began, his voice carrying through the hall with surprising strength. You came to my village. It was a Thursday night. My mother was walking home from a miller's house where she worked late. Her name was Anna. She had brown hair and green eyes. She sang when she cooked. She was afraid of spiders but loved thunderstorms. She would read to me every night before bed, even though I was too old for it. I pretended to be annoyed, but I loved it. Seraphine's expression shifted subtly, the amusement fading into something harder to read. I have taken many mothers, she said quietly. Why should I remember yours? Because she fought, Elias said, his voice trembling now, not with fear but with barely contained emotion. She fought harder than anyone you'd ever taken. You told her so yourself. You said she had fire. You said it was delicious. A flicker of recognition passed through Seraphine's eyes. She died slowly, Elias continued, tears now streaming down his face though his voice remained steady. It took you 3 days. The villagers found her body in the woods, drained and broken. At her funeral, I stood at the grave and I swore I would kill you. I swore I would train, become strong, learn everything about vampires, and destroy you. Seraphine stood slowly from her throne, descending the steps with inhuman grace. She moved like water, like silk, like death itself. The vampires in the shadows stirred, excited by the prospect of violence. And yet, she said, stopping just 5 meters from Elias, towering over him, you carry no weapon. You speak of revenge, but bring no means to achieve it. Have you come here simply to die where your mother died? To join her in whatever pathetic afterlife you peasants believe in? Elias looked up at her, meeting those blood-red eyes with his own brown ones, his mother's eyes. No, he said softly. I came to tell you something. Something I realized 6 months ago, when I finally understood what revenge would cost me, what it would make me become. He took a deep breath. I forgive you for killing my mother. The hall fell absolutely silent. Not the silence of anticipation, but the silence of impossibility, as if reality itself had stuttered, unable to process what it had just heard. Seraphine stared at him, her expression frozen in confusion. What did you say? I forgive you, Elias repeated, his voice stronger now, clearer. I forgive you for taking her from me, for making her suffer, for stealing 3 years of my life to hatred. I forgive you for all of it. And then something happened that had not happened in Thornvale Castle in over 4 decades. Something impossible. Seraphine the Pale, the Blood Countess, the vampire queen who had slaughtered thousands without mercy or remorse, who had broken armies and toppled kingdoms, who had never shown weakness or vulnerability in all her long, cruel existence, fell to her knees. The sound of Seraphine's knees hitting the stone floor echoed through the hall like a crack of thunder. For a moment, no one moved. No one breathed, not that most of them needed to. The vampires in the shadows stood frozen in shock, their predatory instincts unable to comprehend what they were witnessing. Their queen, their immortal sovereign, kneeling before a human child. It was impossible. It was obscene. It was terrifying. Seraphine's hands trembled as they pressed against the cold floor. Her midnight hair fell forward, veiling her face, but Elias could see her shoulders shaking. Not with anger. He had expected anger, had steeled himself for it, but with something far more profound and disturbing. She was weeping, not blood tears, as vampires sometimes wept, but clear, human tears that ran down her pale cheeks and dripped onto black marble, each drop sizzling slightly where it landed, as if the castle itself rejected this display of weakness. What? Seraphine's voice came out broken, fragmented. What have you done to me? Elias stood motionless, his own tears still wet on his face, uncertain what to do. He had imagined many outcomes of this confrontation. He had imagined her laughing at him, mocking his forgiveness as the delusion of a naive child. He had imagined her killing him instantly, offended by his audacity. He had even imagined, in his most hopeful moments, that his words might cause some small hesitation, some flicker of remorse that he could exploit. But this complete collapse, this raw, agonized vulnerability, he hadn't imagined this at all. "My lady," a voice rang out from the shadows, deep, urgent, concerned. A figure emerged from behind one of the pillars, a tall vampire in archaic armor, his face angular and cruel, his eyes burning with golden light. "My lady, this is some trick, some human magic designed to weaken you. Let me destroy the boy. Do not touch him." Seraphine's voice exploded through the hall with such force that several of the torches extinguished instantly. The armored vampire froze mid-step, shock and fear warring on his features. No one touches him. No one speaks. No one moves. She raised her head slowly, and Elias gasped. Her eyes were no longer the color of old blood. They were gray, a dull, human gray that looked wrong in her perfect face. And in those gray eyes was something Elias recognized from his own mirror in the 3 years since his mother's death. Pain. Genuine, unbearable pain. "Do you know," Seraphine whispered, her voice barely audible, "how long it has been since someone looked at me and saw anything but a monster?" Elias said nothing. He sensed that she wasn't really asking him. 147 years, she continued, her voice distant, as if reciting a half-forgotten memory. "That's how long I've been. This thing, this queen of corpses and darkness." She laughed bitterly, the sound harsh and broken. "Do you want to know the truly funny part, child? I remember being human. I remember it perfectly. Every detail, every sensation, the warmth of sunlight, the taste of bread, the feeling of fatigue after a long day's work. I remember loving my parents. I remember praying in church. I remember believing in goodness." She looked down at her pale, clawed hands as if seeing them for the first time. "I was 17 when he turned me," she said softly. "Lord Draven, an ancient vampire who found me beautiful and wanted me for his collection. He drained me to the edge of death and then forced his blood down my throat, and when I woke 3 days later, I was empty, hollow. All the warmth I'd carried inside me was gone, replaced by endless hunger and cold rage." Elias listened, transfixed. Around them, the assembled vampires watched in stunned silence. None of them had ever heard their queen speak of her past. To them, she had always existed as she was, perfect, powerful, eternal. "For the first decade, I fought it," Seraphine continued. "I tried to feed only on criminals, on those who deserved punishment. I tried to maintain some shred of the girl I had been. But Draven, he wouldn't allow it. He tortured me when I showed mercy. He forced me to kill innocents, to terrorize villages, to become the monster he wanted. And eventually I broke. I stopped fighting. I stopped remembering. I let the girl named Helena die completely, and I became Seraphine. I became this." She gestured at herself with disgust. "I killed Draven 50 years ago," she said, a ghost of pride entering her voice. "Staked him while he slept and watched him burn to ash. I told myself it was vengeance, justice. But really, I think I killed him because he was the last connection to who I used to be. The last reminder that I had once been human, once been capable of love and hope and—" She looked up at Elias, her gray eyes shimmering with tears. "Forgiveness." Elias felt his throat tighten. You remember being human?" "Every day," Seraphine whispered. "Every single day for 147 years. Do you understand what that's like? To remember warmth while living in eternal cold? To remember love while being capable only of hunger? To remember God while being damned by him?" She reached up and touched the necklace of black diamonds at her throat, the solidified tears of her victims. "I wear these," she said, "to remind myself of what I am, to ensure I never forget the pain I cause. Some of my court think it's pride that I collect trophies. They don't understand. These are penance, punishment. Every day I wake and feel their weight, and every day I remember that I am irredeemable, that I am beyond salvation, that I am—" "Human," Elias interrupted softly. Seraphine's head snapped toward him, her expression one of confusion and desperate hope. "You're still human," Elias said, his voice stronger now. "You remember warmth because you still carry it. You remember love because you're still capable of it. You remember God because he hasn't forgotten you. You're not a monster, Seraphine. You're a person who's been hurt and broken and lost. You're someone who's made terrible choices and carries terrible guilt. But you're still human, still capable of change, still worthy of..." He stepped forward, closing the distance between them until he stood directly before her kneeling form. Slowly, carefully, he reached out and placed a small hand on her cold, pale cheek. "Forgiveness," he finished. The reaction was immediate and catastrophic. Light exploded from where Elias's hand touched Seraphine's skin. Not the searing holy light of legend that burned vampires to ash, but a soft, golden warmth that spread like ripples in water. Seraphine gasped, her body going rigid, her eyes widening in shock and what might have been agony or ecstasy or both. The vampires in the shadows shrieked and recoiled, shielding their eyes from the gentle radiance. The armored vampire who had spoken earlier fell backward, his golden eyes wide with terror. "It's divine light," he screamed. "The boy carries divine favor. He'll destroy us all." But the light didn't burn. It didn't harm. It simply was. And where it touched Seraphine, something fundamental changed. Color bloomed in her cheeks. Just a hint, just the faintest suggestion of pink beneath the alabaster. Her eyes flickered, shifting between gray and red, as if two identities were warring for control. Her hands, pressed against the floor, looked less like claws and more like the hands of a young woman. "No!" Seraphine breathed, her voice filled with wonder and terror in equal measure. "No, this isn't possible. I'm damned. I'm beyond redemption. This can't." "You killed my mother," Elias said firmly, his hand still on her cheek, the light still radiating from his touch. "You made her suffer. You destroyed my family. Those are facts. I'm not erasing them or pretending they didn't happen. I'm not saying what you did was okay or that you deserve to escape consequences." He leaned forward, his young face serious and sad and impossibly wise. "But I'm also not going to let hatred poison me. I'm not going to become something dark by holding on to revenge. And I'm not going to deny you the chance to change, to be better, to maybe, someday, make amends for what you've done. That's what forgiveness means. Not forgetting, not excusing, but releasing, letting go, choosing hope over hatred." The light began to fade, but its effects remained. Seraphine's eyes had settled on a color between human gray and vampire red, a strange violet that looked both beautiful and unsettling. Her skin retained that faint hint of warmth, and her expression was that of someone waking from a nightmare that had lasted a century and a half. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. "No one deserves forgiveness," Elias replied quietly. "That's why it's called grace." Seraphine closed her eyes, fresh tears streaming down her face. When she opened them again, they focused on Elias with an intensity that made him want to step back, but he held his ground. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice small and lost, nothing like the commanding tone that had greeted him at the entrance. "What do I do with this feeling you've awakened in me?" Before Elias could answer, a sound echoed through the hall, a slow, mocking clap that came from the shadows near the throne. Both Seraphine and Elias turned toward the sound. A figure stepped into the torchlight, and Elias felt his blood turn to ice. It was another vampire, but unlike the others, this one radiated ancient power. He was tall and lean, dressed in clothes that seemed to shift between centuries. Victorian coat over Renaissance doublet over medieval tunic. His face was ageless and cruel, with eyes like chips of black ice. When he smiled, his fangs were longer than any Elias had seen, curved like scimitars. "How touching," the vampire said, his voice smooth as poison honey. The mighty Seraphine, brought to her knees by a child's naive platitudes. "I almost shed a tear myself. Almost." Seraphine's expression transformed in an instant, the vulnerable, broken woman vanishing, replaced by something hard and deadly. She rose to her feet with predatory grace, positioning herself between Elias and the newcomer. "Draven," she hissed, her voice dripping with venom and disbelief. "You're dead. I killed you. I watched you burn." The ancient vampire, Draven, laughed, a sound like glass breaking in a tomb. "Did you? Or did you burn an effigy I left in my resting place, knowing that eventually you'd work up the courage for your pathetic rebellion? I've been watching you for decades, Helena, waiting to see what you become. And I must say," he gestured around the hall dismissively, "I'm disappointed. You had such potential for cruelty, but you never fully committed. You still clung to your humanity like a drowning woman clutching driftwood." He fixed his black eyes on Elias, and the boy felt something cold and hungry crawl across his skin. "But this," Draven continued, "is an unexpected gift. The boy who can awaken dormant humanity with his touch. The child who carries divine light." His smile widened impossibly. "He's not here by accident, Seraphine. He's here because I guided him. I whispered in his dreams. I planted the seeds of forgiveness in his heart. I knew that if anyone could break through your defenses, it would be an innocent offering the one thing you've never received: mercy." Seraphine stepped further in front of Elias, her body tense, ready to spring. "Why? What game are you playing?" Draven's expression shifted to something resembling genuine emotion, though whether it was love or obsession or hunger was impossible to tell. "Because I want you back, Helena, the real you, the girl who fought me, who resisted, who made breaking her so deliciously satisfying. This cold queen you become is boring, predictable, but the woman awakening inside you right now, the one torn between human conscience and vampire nature, the one feeling guilt for the first time in over a century." He shuddered with pleasure. "That's the Helena I fell in love with. That's the creature I want by my side when I reclaim the darkness I've been denied." He took a step forward. "So here's what's going to happen," Draven said casually, as if discussing the weather. "You're going to choose. Right now, right here, you can embrace the humanity this child has awakened, accept your guilt, your shame, your conscience, and watch as I drain him dry in front of you, slowly, making his death last days while you're too weak to stop me. Or," he paused, his black eyes gleaming, "or you can kill him yourself. Prove that you're still the monster you've worked so hard to become. Prove that his forgiveness means nothing. Feed on his divine blood, and let it extinguish that pathetic spark of humanity forever. Do that, and I'll leave him. I'll leave this village. I'll leave you to your little kingdom of shadows. But you must choose. Now." Seraphine didn't move, didn't speak. Elias could feel her trembling, could sense the war raging inside her. Draven smiled. "Tick-tock, Helena. Humanity or monstrosity? Redemption or damnation? Choose." The hall of Thornvale Castle had become a stage for the oldest conflict in existence. The battle between light and darkness, not in the world, but within a single soul. Seraphine stood frozen between Elias and Draven, her body rigid, her newly violet eyes wide with something that looked like madness. Elias could see her hands clenching and unclenching, could hear the small sounds escaping her throat. Half sobs, half growls, as if two voices were fighting for control of the same instrument. Around them, the gathered vampires watched in hungry anticipation. This was better than any hunt, any kill. This was their queen being torn apart from the inside, and the cruel creatures of the night always enjoyed watching things break. "You're trembling," Draven observed with clinical interest, taking another leisurely step forward. "How delightful. I haven't seen you tremble since the night I turned you. Do you remember, Helena? How you begged me not to. How you screamed when you felt yourself dying. How you wept when you woke and realized what you become." "Shut up," Seraphine whispered, but there was no force behind it. "You fed on your own father 3 weeks after your transformation," Draven continued, his voice a caress of cruelty. "Do you remember that? I made you do it. I brought him to you while you were starving, while the hunger was eating you alive from the inside. I told you I'd let him go if you could resist. And you tried so hard, didn't you? You fought it for hours while he wept and prayed and begged God to save his little girl." "Stop," Seraphine said, louder now, her hands moving to her head as if she could physically block out the memories. But God didn't answer. Draven pressed on, moving closer still, circling now like a shark. God never answers when we pray from darkness. And eventually, the hunger won. You fell on him like an animal, and you drained him completely. And when you realized what you'd done, you screamed for 3 days straight. Such beautiful screams. I recorded them in my journal. Would you like to hear them again? I remember them perfectly. Stop. Seraphine's scream shook the foundations of the castle. Cracks appeared in the marble floor. Several torches exploded into fragments of flame. The vampires in the shadows hissed and retreated, frightened by this display of raw, unfocused power. Elias stood very still, his heart hammering in his chest. He wanted to speak, to offer comfort, but he sensed that anything he said right now would only make things worse. This was Seraphine's battle, her choice. All he could do was witness it. Draven, however, looked delighted. There she is, he purred. There's my Helena. All that rage, all that pain, all that delicious guilt rising to the surface. Tell me, do you feel human now? Does it feel good? Does it feel like salvation? He laughed mockingly. It's agony, isn't it? Being human means feeling everything you've done, every life you've taken, every scream you've caused, every mother torn from her child. He glanced at Elias. Like his, for instance. Seraphine's head snapped toward Elias, and a look in her eyes made him take an involuntary step backward. There was so much in that gaze: horror, shame, grief, rage, and beneath it all, a terrible, ravenous hunger that had never really left. I can smell him, she whispered, and her voice had changed. It was layered now, multiple tones speaking simultaneously. The cold queen, the broken girl, the starving predator. His blood. It's different from normal humans. There's something in it, something pure, something that calls to me like nothing ever has before. Divine favor, Draven confirmed helpfully. That's what happens when a soul is touched by genuine forgiveness. It sanctifies the blood, makes it intoxicating to our kind. 1 drop would be worth 100 normal humans. Drinking him completely? He shuddered with theatrical pleasure. That would be an experience beyond description. Seraphine took a step toward Elias. Just 1 step, but it might as well have been a chasm opening between them. Seraphine, Elias said quietly, forcing himself not to run. You don't have to do this. Don't I? Her voice was hollow, distant. You don't understand what you've done, child. You've awakened my conscience, yes, but you have removed my nature. I'm still a vampire, still a predator, still driven by hunger that never, ever stops. And now, for the first time in over a century, I have to feel guilt about that hunger. Do you know what that's like? To be starving and ashamed of your starvation? To need something to survive and hate yourself for needing it? She took another step. Before your forgiveness, I was numb, she continued. I killed without feeling, fed without remorse, existed in a cold, dark space where nothing touched me. It was empty, but it was bearable. But now, tears streamed down her face, even as her fangs extended fully. Now I feel everything. Every life I've taken burns in my memory like a brand. I can see their faces, hear their voices, remember their names. Your mother's name was Anna. She had green eyes like yours. She sang when she was afraid. She died whispering your name. Elias felt his own tears flowing freely now. I know. Do you? Seraphine was only a few meters away now, close enough that Elias could see his reflection in her violet eyes. Do you know what it cost her? I made it last 3 days because her blood was exceptional, rich, vibrant. I savored every drop while she begged me to just let her die. And do you want to know the worst part? The part one couldn't remember until you made me human again. She leaned down, her face level with his, her voice dropping to a broken whisper. I enjoyed it. Not just the blood, the power, the control, the way she looked at me with terror and hatred. It made me feel alive in a way nothing else did. I am not a victim. Elias, I am not some tragic figure who kills reluctantly. I become something that hungers not just for blood, but for suffering. And your forgiveness hasn't changed that. It's only made me aware of it, only made me hate myself for it. She straightened, her hands trembling, her fangs fully visible. So Draven is right, she said, her voice thick with self-loathing. I have to choose. I can let humanity destroy me from the inside, feeling every crime I committed until the guilt crushes my mind into nothing. Or I can kill it. Kill you. Feed on that divine blood, and extinguish this conscience you've awakened. Become numb again. Become safe again. Safe, Elias repeated softly. Is that what you were? Before. Seraphine paused. You remember being human every day for 147 years, Elias continued, his voice steady despite his fear. You wore your victims' tears as punishment. You told yourself you were irredeemable. You were aware of what you were doing, even if you couldn't feel it. That's not numbness. That's not safety. That's a different kind of torture. He took a breath, gathering his courage, and stepped forward, closer to her rather than away. You're right, he said. I don't understand what it's like to be you. I don't know the hunger you feel or the guilt you carry, but I know what it's like to have a choice. I chose to forgive you instead of seeking revenge. I chose hope over hatred. I chose to believe that people, even monsters, can change, not because change is easy or because it erases the past, but because the alternative is giving up, surrendering to darkness, becoming exactly what the darkness wants you to be. He looked directly into her violet eyes. Draven wants you to kill me because he knows that if you don't, there's a chance you might become someone better, someone stronger, someone who fights against her nature instead of surrendering to it. He's afraid of that possibility, terrified of it, because a Seraphine who chooses humanity, even when it's agonizing, even when every instinct screams against it, that's a Seraphine he can't control. Draven's amusement vanished. His expression darkened, became something ancient and terrible. Enough of this tedious philosophy. Helena, make your choice. Now. Seraphine stood utterly still, her eyes locked on Elias's face. The boy could see the war in her expression, could see a dozen different emotions flashing across her features in rapid succession. Fear, hunger, shame, hope, despair, rage. And then, slowly, something shifted. Her fangs began to retract. The red in her eyes faded slightly, leaving more violet, more human. Her hands unclenched, no longer claws but simply hands. No, she whispered, and the words seemed to cost her everything. Draven's expression twisted into fury. What did you say? I said no, Seraphine repeated, stronger now, turning to face her creator. I won't kill him. I won't kill the only person who's shown me mercy in over a century. I won't destroy the chance, however slim, that I might someday be something more than a monster. The ancient vampire's eyes blazed with black fire. You fool. You sentimental, pathetic fool. You think one child forgiveness changes what you are? You think divine favor will protect you from what's coming? I don't know, Seraphine admitted, her voice shaking but determined. I don't know if I can change. I don't know if redemption is possible for me. I don't even know if I deserve the chance to try. But I'm going to try anyway. Because the alternative, becoming numb again, surrendering to the darkness, that's not strength. That's cowardice. And I've been a coward for too long. She moved to stand beside Elias rather than in front of him, no longer a barrier but an ally. If you want him, she said quietly, you'll have to go through me. Draven stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he smiled, a smile of pure, concentrated malice. As you wish, he said softly. And then he attacked. Draven moved with speed that made Seraphine look slow by comparison. One moment he stood 20 meters away. The next he was upon them, his clawed hand already slashing toward Elias's throat. But Seraphine was ready. She caught his wrist mid-strike, her own supernatural strength meeting his, and for a moment they froze in a tableau of frozen violence. Around them, the other vampires shifted nervously, uncertain whether to intervene or simply watch their queen battle her maker. You've grown stronger, Draven observed, almost pleasantly, even as he tried to force his hand forward. but not strong enough. His free hand shot forward in a blur, striking Seraphine in the chest with enough force to send her flying backward. She crashed into a pillar with a sound like thunder, cracked spider-webbing through the marble. Elias screamed and tried to run to her, but Draven was already there, lifting the boy by his throat with one hand, hoisting him off the ground as easily as lifting a doll. Divine blood, Draven mused, his fangs extending as he brought Elias close to his face. Let's see if it lives up to the legend, shall we? No! Seraphine's roar shook the castle. She exploded from the rubble of the broken pillar, moving faster than Elias had ever seen her move, and slammed into Draven with the force of battering ram. They crashed together into the far wall, moving so quickly they became a blur of violence and shadow. Elias fell to ground, gasping, his throat bruised but intact. He scrambled backward as the two ancient vampires fought, their battle too fast and fierce for human eyes to fully follow. They appeared and disappeared, flickered between locations, left after-images of motion. Where they struck, stone shattered. Where they passed, the air itself seemed to tear. And slowly, terribly, it became clear that Seraphine was losing. Draven was older, stronger, unfettered by newly awakened conscience. He fought with ruthless efficiency, landing blow after devastating blow, while Seraphine, distracted by fear for Elias, weakened by the internal war between her natures, struggled to keep pace. "You care about him," Draven said, catching her by the throat and slamming her into the ground hard enough to create a crater. "That's your weakness. That's always been your weakness. You feel too much, care too much. It makes you vulnerable." He raised his hand for a killing strike, and Elias stood up. He didn't think about it, didn't plan it. He simply rose to his feet, walked forward, and placed his hand on Seraphine's fallen form. Light exploded outward once more, that same golden warmth that had brought Seraphine to her knees, but stronger now, brighter, more intense. It washed over her like a wave, and where it touched, wounds began to heal. Strength returned, hope rekindled, and more than that, the light spread from Seraphine to the necklace at her throat, the black diamonds that were solidified tears of her victims. They began to glow, to shine, to transform. And from each diamond, a voice spoke, not with anger or accusation, but with something that sounded like understanding, forgiveness, release, including one voice that made Elias gasp, his mother's voice, soft and loving, echoing from one particular diamond that pulsed with green light. "It's okay, Elias. I'm proud of you. I forgive her too." Seraphine's eyes flew open, now blazing with violet light. When she rose transformed, not fully human, but no longer entirely monster either. Something in between. Something new. She looked at Draven, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of every soul she'd taken, every tear she caused, every crime she committed, and also the impossible burden of their forgiveness. "You taught me to be a monster," she said quietly. "But he taught me I can be something more. And I choose more." What happened next would be remembered in the dark corners of the world for centuries to come. The night the vampire queen chose humanity and paid the price for it. The battle between Seraphine and Draven had transcended physical violence. What had begun as a clash of supernatural creatures had become something more profound, a war between philosophies, between visions of what the darkness could become. Draven fought to drag Seraphine back into the comfortable numbness of monstrosity, while Seraphine fought for something she'd almost forgotten existed, the possibility of change. But possibility, Elias was learning, came with a terrible cost. The golden light that had surged from his touch had given Seraphine temporary strength, but had also drawn Draven's full attention. The ancient vampire now looked at the boy with naked hunger and rage, seeing in him not just prey, but a threat to everything he'd built, everything he'd created when he turned a 17-year-old girl named Helena into the monster called Seraphine. "Enough games," Draven snarled, and his form began to shift. Elias had heard stories about elder vampires, about how the oldest among them could alter their shapes, becoming something between human and bat, something monstrous and primordial. He'd always thought they were just stories meant to frighten children. He'd been wrong. Draven's body elongated, his arms stretching into massive wings of membrane and bone. His face pushed forward into something between human and beast, his eyes multiplying until he had 6 burning orbs of black flame. He grew until he towered 3 meters tall, his shadow swallowing half the hall. This is what we truly are. His voice boomed, no longer remotely human. This is the power you reject, Helena, when you cling to your pathetic humanity. This is what you could become if you'd only surrender to the darkness completely. He lunged not at Seraphine, but at Elias. The boy didn't even have time to scream before Seraphine was there, catching Draven mid-flight, her own form beginning to shift, though not as drastically. Her features sharpened, her fingers lengthened into claws, her teeth became true fangs. She was transformation and restraint in one form, accepting enough of her vampire nature to match Draven's strength, while refusing to become the complete monster he demanded. They collided in midair with sound like thunder, then crashed through one of the massive stained glass windows that lined the hall. Elias ran to the broken window and looked out into the night. The 2 vampires fought in the air above Thornvale Castle, their battle illuminated by lightning that shouldn't exist. Supernatural energy crackling where they struck each other. The storm clouds that eternally hung over the castle began to swirl, responding to the violence below, forming a vortex that centered on the combatants. And Elias, watching from the broken window, realized something with growing horror. Seraphine was still losing, not because she was weaker, but because she was fighting 2 wars simultaneously, the external battle against Draven and the internal battle against her own nature. Every time she struck him, he could see her hesitate, see her struggle with the impulse to go further, to kill, to feed on the dark satisfaction of violence. And every hesitation cost her. She's going to lose, a voice said beside him. Elias jumped, turning to find the armored vampire who'd spoken earlier standing at his shoulder. Up close, the creature looked less terrifying and more tired, ancient and tired, like a soldier who'd fought too many wars. Lord Victor, the vampire, introduced himself quietly. I've served Seraphine for 32 years. Before that, I served others. Before that, I was human, though I barely remember it. I watched the rise and fall of kingdoms, seen empires crumble, witnessed atrocities that would drive mortal minds to madness. He paused. And in all that time, I've never seen anything like what you did to our queen. I just forgave her, Elias said, his eyes still on the battle raging in the sky. Just forgave her, Victor repeated with something that might have been humor. Do you understand what forgiveness means to one of us? We exist in a state of perpetual present. No past regret, no future to hope for, just an endless now of hunger and darkness. We don't change because we can't remember why we should. The human parts of us are locked away, buried, forgotten. He gestured toward Seraphine as she managed to land a solid blow that sent Draven spinning backward through the air. Until you came along, Victor continued. Until you looked at the monster who killed your mother and offered her the one thing she couldn't give herself. Do you know how many of us, watching from the shadows, felt something stir when you did that? How many of us remembered, just for a moment, who we used to be? Elias looked at him sharply. You felt it? All of us did, Victor said, and his golden eyes met Elias's brown ones. The light you carry doesn't just affect one vampire. It reminds all of us that we weren't always this, that we chose or were forced to become monsters, but that the humans we were still exist somewhere inside the darkness. He looked out at the battle again, his expression troubled. But that's precisely why Draven is so dangerous. He doesn't just want to kill Seraphine. He wants to kill the idea of redemption itself. Because if she can change, if she can embrace her humanity even partially, then all of us might be able to. And for someone like Draven, who's built his identity entirely on being a monster, that possibility is more terrifying than any holy symbol or sunlight. As if to punctuate his words, Draven managed to catch Seraphine and slam her down onto the castle battlements with crushing force. Stone exploded outward. Seraphine's scream of pain echoed through the night. She needs help, Elias said desperately. We have to do something. We? Victor laughed bitterly. I'm a vampire, boy. I can't help her against Draven. He's too old, too powerful. And the others... He gestured toward the shadows where dozens of vampires still watched. They're waiting to see who wins. Whoever triumphs will be their master. That's how it works in the darkness. Might makes right. Then I'll help her, Elias said, and before Victor could stop him, he ran. He ran through the hall, past the gathered vampires who watched with predatory curiosity, through corridors he'd never seen, following the sounds of battle. He ran until he found stairs leading upward, spiral steps carved into the castle walls, ascending toward the battlements where Seraphine and Draven fought. His legs burned. His lungs screamed. He was just a 13-year-old boy, not a warrior or hero or saint. But he was also the child who'd chosen forgiveness over vengeance, and somehow that choice had carried power. Power that had awakened something in Seraphine, something that might save her if it could just reach her in time. He burst onto the battlements to find horror. Draven had Seraphine pinned against the stone ramparts, one massive clawed hand around her throat, squeezing. Her violet eyes were dimming, fading back toward red, toward the monster she'd been before Elias's forgiveness. The human part of her was dying, suffocated by Draven's grip and the overwhelming force of his ancient will. "You see," Draven hissed, his multiple eyes blazing with triumph. "You see how futile resistance is? How pathetic your hope was. Humanity is weakness. Helena, it's always been weakness. And now you'll watch as I drain your precious child, and you'll be unable to stop me because you chose conscience over strength." He turned toward Elias with those burning eyes. "Come here, boy," he commanded. And despite Elias's will, despite every ounce of courage he possessed, he felt his legs moving forward. Vampire compulsion, irresistible to mortals. Let me show Helena what her mercy has earned her. Let me show her the price of choosing humanity. Elias tried to stop walking and couldn't. His body betrayed him, carrying him step by step toward Draven's waiting fangs. He could see Seraphine struggling weakly, see tears of blood streaming down her face, see her mouthing two words, "I'm sorry." But Elias wasn't sorry. Even walking to his death, even knowing he'd failed, he wasn't sorry. Because for 3 years he'd lived with hatred burning his chest, had felt it consuming him from the inside, had known it was turning him into something dark and twisted. And then, 6 months ago, he'd realized something. His mother wouldn't have wanted him to live that way. She would have wanted him to choose love over hate, forgiveness over revenge, hope over despair. So he'd made a choice, the hardest choice of his life, and he'd make it again. "I forgive you," he said as he walked toward Draven. The ancient vampire laughed mockingly. "I forgive you," Elias repeated, louder now. "I forgive you for what you're about to do. I forgive you for what you did to Seraphine. I forgive you for every evil act, every victim, every crime across all your long existence." Draven's laughter stopped. "What did you say?" he demanded, his grip on Seraphine loosening slightly. "I forgive you," Elias said a third time, and now he wasn't just speaking to Draven. He was speaking to all of them, to every vampire watching from the shadows, to every monster who'd forgotten they'd once been human, to the darkness itself. "I forgive all of you. Not because you deserve it, not because it erases what you've done, but because someone has to choose mercy. Someone has to offer hope. Someone has to believe that change is possible." And for the second time that night, light exploded from Elias, but this time it wasn't confined to a single touch. It radiated outward in waves, washing over battlements, over the castle, over the gathered vampires in the hall below. It didn't burn them, didn't harm them. It simply touched them, reminded them, awakened something they buried centuries ago. Throughout Thornvale Castle, vampires fell to their knees. In the hall, Victor collapsed, his golden eyes streaming with tears as memories of his human life flooded back, his wife's face, his children's laughter, the warmth of sunlight on his face before he'd been turned. In the dungeons, ancient vampires who'd served Seraphine for decades clutched their heads as conscience returned like a flood, showing them every face of every victim they'd taken. In the towers, the catacombs, the secret chambers, creatures of the night remembered what it meant to be human, and wept at what they'd become. And Draven screamed, not a roar of anger, but a scream of absolute agony as the light struck him. His monstrous form began to break apart, not into ash but into memories. faces and voices and moments from his 1,000-year existence, all the humans he'd killed, all the innocents he'd destroyed, all the vampires he created and corrupted. They swirled around him like accusing ghosts, and for the first time in his long, terrible life, he felt what they'd felt. He felt their pain, their fear, their despair. He felt everything. No! He gasped, his form shrinking, reverting to something more human. No, this isn't... I can't. But the light was merciless. It forced him to feel, to remember, to understand the full weight of what he'd done across 10 centuries of existence. And that weight was crushing. Draven fell to his knees, his black eyes now gray and all too human, and looked up at Elias with an expression of absolute horror. "What have I done?" he whispered. "God forgive me. What have I done?" And then, before anyone could react, he did something no one expected. He walked to the edge of the battlements, looked out at the eastern horizon where the faintest hint of dawn was beginning to lighten the sky, and spoke one final sentence. "I'm so sorry." Then he stepped off the edge and fell. But he didn't fall as a vampire, protected by supernatural resilience. He fell as a human, fragile and mortal, and when he hit the rocks below, his 1,000-year existence ended not in fire or holy light, but in simple final death. The silence that followed was absolute. Elias stood frozen, shocked by what had happened. He wanted to save Seraphine, not this, not to drive someone to suicide with the weight of their own guilt. "You couldn't have known," Seraphine's voice said quietly. She'd pushed herself upright and now stood beside him, her hand gently touching his shoulder. Her violet eyes were sad but understanding. Draven was too old, too steeped in darkness. When you awaken his conscience after 1,000 years of atrocity, the weight of it destroyed his mind. Some souls... She paused, swallowing hard. Some souls are too heavy for their bearers to carry. "But I didn't want him to die," Elias said, tears streaming down his face. "I wanted him to change, to be better, like you." "I know," Seraphine said softly, "but I had you. I had your forgiveness to anchor me, to remind me that redemption was possible. Draven had no one. He'd spent a millennium ensuring that no one would ever care about him, that he'd never be vulnerable to love or mercy or hope. When those things returned all at once, there was nothing to sustain him through the pain." She looked out at the horizon, where dawn was brightening more rapidly now. "We should go inside," she said quietly. "The sun will rise soon, and I'm not sure if I can survive it anymore. The light you've awakened in me might protect me, or it might make me more vulnerable. I don't know, but..." She looked down at Elias with an expression of profound gratitude. "Whatever happens, I want you to know that you gave me the greatest gift anyone could give. You gave me a chance, a choice, a possibility. What will you do?" Elias asked as they walked toward the stairs. Behind them, the sky continued to brighten. "I don't know," Seraphine admitted. "I can't undo what I've done. I can't bring back your mother or any of my other victims. But maybe I can protect instead of destroy. Maybe I can use the centuries ahead of me, however many I have, to save lives instead of taking them. Maybe that's what redemption looks like for someone like me. Not erasing the past, but trying to balance it with a better future." They descended the stairs together, emerging back into the hall where dozens of vampires still knelt, many of them weeping, all of them transformed by the light that had awakened their dormant humanity. Victor approached them slowly, his armored form somehow seeming smaller, more vulnerable. "My lady," he said to Seraphine, we don't know what to do. We remember being human now. We remember what we've lost, what we've done. How do we live with this knowledge?" Seraphine looked at her gathered court. Creatures she'd ruled through fear and power, now transformed into broken, confused souls struggling with newly awakened consciences. She could have dismissed them, could have told them to figure out themselves. Instead, she did something she'd never done in over a century of rule. She knelt down to Victor's level and spoke with gentle compassion. "We figure out together," she said. "We help each other carry the weight. We remind each other that change is possible, even if it's painful. We become something new, Not human, not quite monster, but something in between, something that remembers both what we were and what we became, and uses that knowledge to be better. She stood and addressed the entire hall. This castle has been a place of darkness for too long, a place of death and fear and cruelty. Starting tonight, that changes. Anyone who wishes to leave may do so without consequence. Anyone who wishes to try this path of redemption with me is welcome to stay. But understand, it will be hard. Harder than anything we've faced. Because choosing humanity means feeling everything we've buried. It means carrying guilt and shame and grief. It means, she looked at Elias, it means accepting forgiveness we don't deserve and try and become worthy of it. One by one, the vampires rose. Some left, vanishing into the shadows, unable to bear the weight of their newly awakened consciences. But many stayed. Most stayed. Because Seraphine was right. Carrying that weight alone was impossible. But together, supporting each other, reminding each other hope and possibility, together they might survive it. The sun crept higher. Through the broken windows, pale light began to filter into the hall. The first sunlight to touch Thornvale Castle in 43 years. The sun, Victor whispered nervously. My lady, the sun. But the light didn't burn. It touched Seraphine's skin, and while she flinched instinctively, nothing happened. The golden warmth that Elias had awakened in her somehow protected her, somehow allowed her to bear the touch of dawn. Around her, other vampires cautiously stepped into the light and found the same thing. They didn't burn. The divine favor that came with forgiveness, with choosing humanity, had changed them fundamentally.